Good morning, everybody. Sorry about the delay in getting this out to you. This is the second or third time I've attempted this. Can I come up? You gonna say hi to everybody? This is Jack. I don't think you've met Jack yet. This is going to be the in-class lecture for, it's actually for last week's lecture. This upcoming in-class lecture will be put on prior to Thursday. And the online materials will be on there today as well. So we're going to be proceeding much like we would be if we were in class. The only difference is that the in-class lecture will be presented this way. Not so bad, I suppose, but I won't be able to get the questions from you. So if you do have questions or concerns along the way about any of the material that I've presented, then just let me know. You can contact me on Slate. Having said that, let's just move into it. Today we're going to be talking about goats. The online portion talks about sheep. We're obviously moving more into the livestock portion of the livestock session. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about goats today. So you will find the PowerPoint presentation on Slate, so you can just follow along there. And obviously we have the video here that you can go on as well. So the primary purposes of the section is the same pretty much for all of the sections that we've had so far. Really, it's about how do we interact with the animals that are under our care, and that interaction, how does it affect both their health and their mental state. We're going to be utilizing the common terminology related to the species. Again, you got to know how to speak the language. If you're going to be on the farm with the sheep, you got to know how to at least speak the common language, the common terms, and know what you're talking about. We're going to be describing the biology and the behavior of goats, as well as explaining the housing, husbandry, and basic health practices. Again, this is about how we interact with the animals that are under our care. As far as the history goes, goats are one of the longest domesticated species at 11,000 years. There's more than 300 worldwide breeds, and the wild goats are still found in many countries. The wild goat, you can see here, compared to the domesticated goat, there's some pretty significant changes, but there are also some pretty significant similarities too. A little bit more similarity between a domesticated goat and a wild goat than a chihuahua and a wolf. Again, we were talking about how much we've manipulated this species over time. And goats are one that we haven't manipulated them quite as much. They're still very good climbers. That's an issue when you're housing them. For the reason why do we have goats? What's the purpose? What do we want from them? There again is always something that we want from them. Mainly with goats, it's meat and milk. The meat is called chevon, and the milk is used mostly for goat cheese. Those are the main reasons, but we also have goats for fiber. There's a couple of goats that have fibers that we want, like mohair and cashmere. We also keep goats as pets, much more so than, say, a cow. They're also used for clearing brush. They do clean out grass, and as they are foragers quite well. You can use their skin or leather as a chamois. That's one of the sources of chamois for car washing. And then there's also even goat yoga, which is a thing. Now, as far as the terminology goes, again, this is something you just have to remember these, write them down a number of times, write the definition down a number of times. You really want to be in a position where you're just, remembering these terms. If they're not producing any sort of emotional connection, then we just have to remember them by other means. Caprine, veterinary term for goats, is caprine, much like for cows was bovine. Equine for horses. Doe or nanny is referring to a female goat, whereas a male goat is a buck or a billy. A wether is a castrated male goat. and a kid is a goat under 1 year of age. That's probably the easiest one to remember. A kid is under 1 year of age. Kidding is the act of giving birth in goats, and a group of goats is called a herd. Goat biology, again, we have to think about why they are the way they are, and what is it about the way that they are that influences the way we keep them and how we acquire the materials we want from them. They are members of the bovine family, but they're closely related to deer. They do range from around 1.5 feet to 4 feet tall and weigh anywhere between 20 and 250 pounds. They're slightly larger than sheep in general, but that's except for the miniature breeds, the pygmy goats. Their pupils are quite interesting. They're a rectangular shape, very distinctive. If you see that rectangular shape of a pupil, you know it's from a goat. Oh, there's some other variations, but the livestock, it's the goats. Many have horns, but some are polled, which means they're born hornless. So that's naturally polled. And as far as lifespan, they're usually 9 to 12 years of age. They are ruminants, and remember what we were talking about when we discussed the reason for the 4 chambers of the stomach of the bovine, the reason for the teeth, the reason that they have the biological setup that they do is for chewing on grass. And we remember that it's cellulose, or the 9 digestible parts of the plant, difficult to digest parts of the plant, that need that extra work, need to be ground. They need to have those 4 chambers of the stomach that each have a different job of breaking down the material, because it's very difficult to break down. They grow hair and not wool, as we said. They are cloven hoofed. If you've heard that term, cloven hoof refers to the shape of the hoof. They have 2 hooves with each foot. It's split in the center, whereas with the horses, obviously you only have the one. With cows you have 2, and deer and goats you have 2. They're generally bred in the fall and the kid in the spring, and there's usually 2 to 3 kids per doe per breeding season. Some will breed more than once a year. The gestation is 150 days, and as far as birthing or kidding goes, twins are most common. Okay, these are the parts of the goat. These are, again, you just have to remember them. We do take note of the beard is obvious, which the beard is. The udder only has 2 teats, and the hooves are cloven hoofed. You can see some of the names of the parts of the goat are similar to the parts of the cow. So you're gonna have to watch out, but paying attention to that. Goat behavior, again, one of the things I'm stressing throughout this course is how we interact with the mental state of the animals that we care for. And knowing what their natural behavior is, allowing outlets for natural behavior, and allowing for being aware of situations in which stresses are building up within an animal's perceived environment. And it's important that it's their perception of the environment and whether or not that has any difficulties in it. It's that aspect of mental care that you as caregivers need to keep in mind. So as far as the goat behavior goes, you have to take into effect that they're quite intelligent and more independent. They're very playful, and they tend to explore. Mix that with the fact that they're very good climbers means that it's difficult to actually keep them where you want to keep them. It requires you to have different housing setup. They tend to be docile, friendly, and easy to handle, but if they're agitated, they will demonstrate it. We can see how a dog gets upset, and we talked a bit about how different animals will display the different anxieties, so to speak. If they're upset, what goats will do often is butt or rear up on their legs. and they'll even raise their hackles, sneeze, snort, and stamp. Again, the fact that they're more independent does mean that they're going to be more likely to scatter in a situation where we're trying to herd them up. So it's not going to be like getting sheep to go into one place. You have to do it differently. As far as the herd hierarchy goes, there is a hierarchy, just like in most herds, but it's usually led by a dominant doe because the bucks aren't usually part of the herd at all. The bucks being the intact adult males of breeding age. If the lead doe moves, the herd usually follows, and the method of eating we talked about is a form of foraging. Now, bucks are a special case because of the difficulties that the particular biology of this species presents. Specifically, they emit a very strong odor from scent glands on the top of the head, and they use that to rub or mark the territory. These scent glands on the top of the head can be removed at the time of dehorning to avoid that smell. The other thing about bucks is they're highly affected by the testosterone. They can become very aggressive, and they even have some unsavory habits, such as urinating all over themselves, and you can read the rest there. Because of these difficulties, it's best if the males are actually housed in a separate facility on their own with the facility set up to them. And when they want to have some female goats bred, they'll bring the female goats to the male as opposed to the other way around. So this is a video of a goat and a dog interacting. I really want you to pay attention to each of their behaviors. Tell me what you think is going on here. Tell me what you think is going on with their minds. What are each of them thinking during this interaction? I hope you can see that clearly enough. If you can't, the link is in the PowerPoint. You see the tail. Oh, I get a little message from the dog. See how the goat is, let's see. Look at that, like what he's doing right now. He went over to that drain pipe, and you can see, if you look at the drain pipe, it's actually bent at the bottom from the goat going over and bumping the drain pipe. Notice he doesn't bump the dog. And he knows not to bump the dog because he knows the dog's not another goat. But he needs to display that behavior. He needs to butt his head against something during this interaction. And the other thing too is, do you think that this goat is upset or happy? To me, this is a very happy goat. This is because I'm saying that because it's play. He's demonstrating a play behavior. He's not trying to get out of the situation. He's trying to get the dog to do something because the dog was not doing anything. So unless the goat wanted to sit exactly where the dog is, it's more likely a situation, and I can tell just by the way the goat is moving and the way the dog is interacting, the dog is not worried at all. He gives out his little message when he needs to, but the goat really needs to display this interaction that he normally does, that he's born to display this interaction, and it's that innate desire to bump heads. That's how they communicate to each other. That's how the young ones will play, and without the ability to do that, he diverts to another situation where he can display that behavior. That, on the side of a barn with the eaves trough getting dented, is not the biggest consequence. But that is the same situation where we have a biologically motivated behavior for an animal, say a cat urinating on a wall or a specific spot in the house. That's a cat also doing the same sort of territorial interaction, with a consequence that actually results in animals dying regularly, unfortunately. So it's important that we address that outlet, make sure that they have the ability to um, express the naturally inclined behaviors. So just wanted you to see that. We'll just watch it a little bit more. You see the tail wags just a little bit quicker when the dog barks. Yeah, if this was an eavesdrop manufacturing place, it would not be good for a goat. You see that is? See that is? Woof. Now we're moving into the industry section, kind of how the money flows through the system and how this industry itself is set up. In Canada, there's about 250,000 goats, with dairy goats making up the greatest percentage of that. So in that scenario, obviously, the thing that's most desired is goat's milk from goats. There's about 250 licensed goat dairies, with about anywhere from 150 to 1,200 head per dairy. And there's about 5,500 goat farms in Canada. The fiber goats are the smallest section of the industry, and both the meat and the milk consumption exceed the production in Canada. So, meaning Canadians will consume more goat products than we produce. So we have to actually import them from other countries. Again, the meat is called chevon, and it's the most popular meat eaten worldwide. Has a lot in there is also a close connection to the religious ceremonies, and an Easter kid is a meat goat weighing between 16 and 40 pounds, again sold seasonally to ethnic markets. Capretta was the meat from milk-raised kids, 25 to 40 pounds. The price of the goats is typically higher before major ethnic holidays because of the fact that they're going to be consumed more during those times. There is an increase in interest in goat meat in the gourmet restaurants. Usually it'll be usually a locally sourced goat, but also quite expensive. Gram for gram, however, health-wise, it's lower in calories, fat, and saturated fats and cholesterol than beef, pork, lamb, and even skinless chicken. So worldwide, more people drink this than cow's milk. It's got more protein, less cholesterol, and we can make cheese with it as well. Specialty cheese called chèvre, not chevon, chèvre. Chevon is the meat, chèvre is the cheese. Goats are milked usually twice daily in dairy similar to the dairy cattle. Remember when we talked a bit about bringing the milk container to the cow, and then progressing to bringing the cow to the container? We do have a very similar sort of setup with the goats. The pygmy goats, one of the smaller specialty breeds, have milk with the highest butterfat percentage. Remember that the fat percentage is what we use to gauge the quality of a milk, is the volume and the percentage of butterfat or fat. And pygmy goats, because of that, are milked once a day. This is a system where you can see the goats are brought in along a particular setup, and then we bring the container. You can see that this is all going into a single container, and then that will go into the bulk tank from there. But this is just an example of one of the types of setups. The types of hair that we get from these guys, excuse me, mohair is from Angora goats. Remember that, mohair is from Angora goats. And cashmere is also a fiber that we get from them. It's a soft down undercoat produced by most breeds, except the Angora. The cashmere breed especially produces exceptional cashmere, which is combed out. The goat breeds themselves are categorized into five main groups for the goat breeds. We've got the Angora goats, again, for the fiber. Dairy and meat are the most popular. We've got cashmere goats, again, for the fiber, and we have the miniature goats. Now, the miniature goats are, they tend to be more the ones that are kept as pets as well. For more information on the goat breeds, see the online material. So goat production systems, again, think about with the cattle, we remember with the beef cattle, we had those different sections. Goat production systems have similar sections as well. They're more intense focus on the dairy production for goats versus the sheep. Not as much sheep are used for the milking. They can be kept in the confinement method, free stall, so in other words, indoors all the time, or they can go on pasture in warm months and come in for milking and confined during the winter months. Regardless of the method, we do need for the goat's ability to again exist when they're within their environment comfortably. The farm herd method is the most popular, with animals raised and reproduced on pasture. The goal for the farm herd is to produce kids for meat, and there may be hundreds of animals in the herd. Often is used as a farming sideline. We just get the meat on the bones and then send them to the market. So that's the farm herd method. We're just basically producing goats for meat. There's also the purebred herd. Now this is meant to produce other animals of good quality or pure genetics, such that they get the best production that's possible out of them. So the purebred herds include a small system of producing goats that will give rise to the best quality individuals. So we're going to be looking at someone that's running a purebred herd will be looking at those individuals that produce goats that are highly desired within their category. So if it's a meat producing, they're going to choose the ones that produce a lot of meat. If it's a dairy producing breed, then they're going to want ones that produce more butterfat. This type of interaction with the breed and being able to pick out and breed for the most desired qualities is also much more work intensive. It's usually a full-time job. They also do show quality animals. That's similar to the dog breeds, in the sense that you get dog breeds that will be shown, whereas you get others that are not. So the purebred herd is that section of animals that they really want to show off the product. So they show quality animals. The confinement method is increasing in popularity, and the goal is to produce milk or meat from kids. The confinement method is just not allowing them out on the pasture as much. There's obvious disadvantages of that, but the advantages to it, and the reason it's becoming more popular, is control, basically. Being able to control the variables that are involved. You're going to be able to control predation. You're not going to have predation going on. The temperature can be controlled. Diseases coming into the environment are much less likely if we have a walled, controlled environment. So we'll have fewer health problems, less risk of injury, predation, things like that. Disadvantages would be obviously the cost, and then how do we create something where the goats can interact with the environment in a way that makes them comfortable. So housing, again, we either have them on the pasture in the summer and in barns in the winter. The loose housing is preferred, so that's one of the ways that we manage kind of their particular needs in housing, is providing a minimum of 10 square feet per goat. You can see how that is more species specific than, say, chickens, which don't receive such a kind allowance. The movement to the full-time confinement, again, is about controlling the variables that go into the herd. Fencing is an important consideration. We talked a little bit about this earlier. It has to be at least a 5-foot fence. As they say in that proverb, if a fence will hold water, it will hold a goat. So if you've got a proverb, that means that you're pretty good at doing that sort of thing. So again, an example of knowing what we need to do for a particular species. If we had cow fences up for a goat farm, then that wouldn't work. Nutrition, they do prefer leaves, grasses, hay, alfalfa. They're browsers, that's the forage, that's why they have the anatomy they have. But remember, when we want to get some meat on the bones of the beef cattle, what do we give them? It's not the grass and the forage, we move more to energy dense. And that includes corn, soy, things like that. During periods of pregnancy, lactation, or areas where we want more energy to go into an animal, we move away from the forages and go into the more concentrated diets such as corn. Contrary to the popular myth that goats will eat anything, is they do tend to be a bit finicky. Healthcare in general involves several aspects. Obviously, relatively healthy, I think, has a bit to do with the fact that we haven't too much genetically modified them. We haven't introduced difficulties through that genetic modification process. So they do tend to be healthy. Things that need to be done: castration for the young males. Disbudding is the term to remove the scent glands. Remember, disbudding is not dehorning. Dehorning is removing the horn. Disbudding is disbudding is the removal of the horn. The descenting is the gland. Disbudding is the cauterizing the horn so that they don't grow, and the descenting takes place at the same time. Dairy goats may need hoof trimming periodically, and then deworming and vaccines is the other kind of routine stuff that we have. Again, pet goats is another aspect of the industry. And anytime you get into that, there's going to be a different sort of interaction. You're not talking with a producer and their livelihood, you're talking about a family and their family member. So you have to shift gears in that sort of situation. So that's it for the goats. You will find the material for the sheep online. I will be populating the marks shortly, again, because of the recent changes. They will be delayed a little bit more, but we'll get feedback for you in a timely manner. Also, I want you to know that we don't have to worry about the timing. We've got more than enough time to cover all the material we need to for the class, and I think if we handle it this way, if you want to give me some feedback as to whether or not you thought that this presentation was helpful to you in any way or not helpful, or what else you might like to see, letting me know would be good. Other than that, it's just keep up to date on Slate. We're going to be going through the material the same way we would if we were meeting in class. The online materials for last week, as well as the in-class, which this is, are going up today, and the ones for this coming week will be going up in the next couple of days. I think that's it. We'll leave it at that, and yeah, I'll see you at the next video.